Iraq, Kuwait sign important agreement. Tarek Terror. 2019-5-14845, 595 times read. International, Euphrates News. The Kuwaiti Ministry of Finance has announced its signature and its Iraqi counterpart agreement to avoid double taxation and prevent financial evasion with regard to income and capital taxes. The ministry said in a statement that the agreement contains multiple advantages related to tax exemptions and deductions for investments or businesses in Kuwait or Iraq. The agreement signed by the Kuwaiti side, Under-Secretary of the Ministry Saleh Al-Siraji and his Iraqi counterpart, Mayor Johan, aims to remove the financial obstacles that could restrict the movement of capital and trade between the two countries by not double taxation on funds or individuals, she said. The agreement was signed on the sidelines of the 7th session of the Iraqi-Kuwaiti Joint High Commission, which was hosted by Kuwait on 11 and May 12 under the chairmanship of Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Hamid Al-Sabah and Foreign Minister Mohammed Al-Hakim. Replacement of 2 deputies by decision of the Federal Court. Tarek Terror. 2019-5-14-1231, 968 read time, Baghdad, Euphrates News. The Federal Supreme Court decided to replace 2 deputies in the parliament. The Federal Court issued its decision on Tuesday, the validity of the membership, Star Al-Jabri, instead of the deputy, Ajil Al-Musawi, and Insensati, instead of the deputy, Hamid Al-Rakabi. China lowers RMB exchange value. May 14, 2019 Economy News Baghdad. The Chinese People's Bank, the central bank, on Tuesday, amid another round of worsening trade disputes with the United States, sharply lowered the value of yuan in exchange for the US dollar by 0.6%, according to the regulator. The central bank has set the RMB exchange rate at 6.8365 per dollar, which is below 411 points from the average selection, which was announced earlier, when the exchange rate form was 6.7954 per dollar. Against the backdrop of the ongoing trade war with the United States, the Chinese currency rate has declined dramatically since the beginning of the year, and the central bank has confirmed that it will maintain the exchange rate at a rational and stable level. Chinese authorities, including Premier Li Keqiang, have repeatedly stated that they will not turn the yuan exchange rate into a tool to react to the trade dispute. China plans to impose tariffs on US goods worth $60 billion, after the United States stepped up a bitter trade war and lifted the tariffs on Chinese products worth $200 billion, the Finance Ministry said on Monday. According to Reuters, the ministry said in a statement on Monday that China would impose tariffs on 5,140 US products from June. US President Donald Trump on Monday warned China to respond to the increase in tariffs imposed on Chinese goods last week, saying that American consumers would not pay for any increase in tariffs. Abdul Mahdi begins a visit to Ankara and a Turkish delegation to Baghdad. 1302 May 14, 2019. Information translation. Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi is scheduled to begin an official visit to Turkey on Wednesday to meet with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and senior Turkish officials. While Turkish media outlets revealed a visit by a senior Turkish delegation to Baghdad after Abdel Mahdi's visit, Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi will visit Turkey tomorrow to meet with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, said the English-language Daily News, Turkish-speaking newspaper Al Akbar, saying, the 2 leaders are planning to discuss the influence of the Labour Party of Kurdistan in the northern Iraqi region of Sinjar, and the new border crossing will be Anshayo between the 2 countries, which will increase trade volume from $10 to $20 billion in addition to water issues. Iraqi and Turkish officials will discuss measures to boost the volume of trade between the 2 countries, she said, adding that following the visit of the Iraqi Prime Minister, a Turkish delegation led by Trade Minister Rahat Bikin will attend the Iraqi-Turkish Trade Forum in Baghdad. Turkey's desire to increase the supply of energy from Iraq will be another item on the agenda during the talks between the Iraqi and Turkish sides in Ankara, the paper said, adding that the visit of the Iraqi Prime Minister comes after the announcement by the United States that it will end the exemption from sanctions of a number of oil-importing countries from Iran, including Turkey, which is willing to balance its oil supply, as Iraq is one of Turkey's main suppliers of crude oil, so Ankara can compensate for the Iranian product. Quotation mark. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is also scheduled to visit Baghdad as part of the 4th high-level meeting of the Strategic Cooperation Council at the end of this year, the paper said. Official reveals the destination of Iraq's looted billions and the largest looting. May 14, 2019, 177 politician Kakamesh Press, a former government official of a Gulf newspaper, revealed different destinations for billions of dollars looted from Iraq over the past 12 years, stressing that most of them have been transformed into commercial complexes, residential and commercial properties, land, banks and satellite channels. The official, who declined to be named, said the majority of the looted funds are in different forms with officials, relatives, MPs and political blocs. He said the biggest looting of state funds took place during the era of former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maluki's 2006-2014, explaining that billions of dollars were smuggled abroad, while another part of the looted funds was invested inside Iraq. He noted that the former Haider al-Abadi government had not been without corruption, but to a lesser extent because of the financial crisis that was hitting the country at the time. stressing that most of the former officials and deputies registered their property with the names of relatives to escape prosecution. A number of civil banks in Baghdad had been run by politicians, pointing out that it was not limited to that, but extended to the media. Some former officials have formed local media agencies to promote their projects, he said, noting that a former parliamentarian bought a quota in a known satellite, pledging to pay staff salaries until the next local elections scheduled for early next year, in exchange for some changes structural in the space in accordance with its partisan agenda. He noted that the chairman of a former parliamentary committee had set up a large commercial complex in the banking district east of Baghdad, explaining that some of the private schools were also owned by politicians, and they were earning huge sums of money annually. This is not confined to Baghdad, as the Iraqi provinces are witnessing an extension of the power of those involved in corruption cases. According to observers, the inability of the state to return looted funds, despite the presence of 4 oversight bodies in Iraq, is the Supreme Anti-Corruption Council led by Prime Minister Adel Abdel-Mahdi, the Office of Financial Supervision, the Integrity Commission and the offices of General Inspectors in the ministries, which raises more than a question mark on silence for the recovery of funds can fill part of the requirements of the Iraqi state facing a suffocating financial crisis that has negatively impacted the lives of citizens. The wealth of Iraq has been the biggest looting in the country's history since 2003, said economist Saad Abdel Hussein, adding that the looted funds were collected to cover all the foreign debts and the problems of Basra and 3 other southern governorates of water, electricity and hospitals were terminated. The solution lies in prosecuting the funds of former and current Iraqi officials and parliamentarians at home and abroad, he said, adding that condoning this undermines citizens' confidence in the executive and oversight powers. A local government member in Anbar said that former and current officials and politicians were buying real estate and land in prominent areas with large sums of money, saying in a press statement that some high-priced areas had become feudal for officials. The official, who declined to be named, said there were attempts by prominent Iraqi officials to take over a large area of the Corniche city adjacent to the Third Bridge project in order to turn it into a tourist resort with a hotel and other facilities, stating that it was not only after former members of the government local Balinbar buys and builds huge commercial complexes in the city. In the meantime, Justice Ministry Inspector General Karim Al-Ghozi said that the judiciary has issued a new sentence to jail a real estate registration manager in Karbala for 3 new years, for the total years of his reign 6 years, stressing in a statement that prison sentences were issued in absentia because he added fake restrictions on property belonging to citizens. The Iraqi judiciary had earlier sentenced the director of land registration in Karbala for charges related to tampering and forgery. The Iraqi parliament is witnessing a debate on the draft law on the Iraq Money Recovery Fund. According to a previous statement by the Integrity Commission, she discussed with the Parliamentary Integrity Committee the draft law, noting that the fund is supposed to be managed by the Integrity Authority in cooperation with the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Oil, Finance, Justice and Trade. The Member of Parliament of the Victory Alliance Fali al-Zayedi has already stressed the need to legislate the law because it will contribute to the recovery of billions of dollars that escaped during the time of the previous regime and after the U.S. occupation of Iraq in 2003 by corrupt and illegal smugglers. Ministry of Communications announces launch of satellite and space agency soon. May 14, 2019 Economy News Baghdad. The Ministry of Communications on Tuesday announced coordination with the French government to complete the satellite and the Iraqi Space Agency. The ministry has coordinated with the French government to complete the projects of the Iraqi satellite and the Iraqi Space Agency, and in coordination with the competent French company Airbus, said Amir Al-Bayati, Senior Undersecretary for Technical Affairs of the department, according to the semi-official newspaper Al Saba. Satellite manufacturing, a loan from the French government for the completion of these projects, as well as other projects of the United Nations, was confirmed by the Secretary General, he said, noting that coordination after the satellite project has ceased for a long time now. I welcome the fact that, in the aftermath of the draft, the satellite project will serve the areas of the United Nations, and it is required that the resources of the country should be left to the country through which the Iraqi satellite is fully completed. Of the security, the agricultural and industrial sectors, as well as the environmental and military aspects of the country, and those that would serve its security. Quotation mark. It has provided for the fact that the Iraqi Space Agency, which will be providing services to government institutions and various sectors, is the intention of the companies to develop Iraq's orbits, slot orbit, for the development of projects in the United Nations, 45.65 and 50 degrees, as well as commercial and technical coordination with the company, private, to train technicians and specialists for a year to qualify them and give them a license to work in the long term to create satellites and high and medium circuits. Quotation mark. The technical agent for communications announced that an agreement had been reached between his ministry and French companies to conclude a memorandum of understanding in this respect, noting that I have worked to establish the Space Affairs section as the nucleus of the Iraqi Space Agency, and there is technical coordination with the French government to provide support in the area's technical and legal project. Government endeavors to resolve the daily contract and procedure file. May 14, 2019 Economy News Baghdad. Secretary General of the Council of Ministers Hamid Naim Al-Ghazi stressed the importance of resolving the file of the government contracts and the daily procedure, in compliance with the decision of the Council of Ministers issued in this regard. In a statement to the Economy News, the Secretary General, while chairing a meeting of the committee to prepare a mechanism to address the issue of temporary workers in government institutions, stressed the need to achieve job stability and redress for all segments of society. He called for the revision and enactment of laws on the provision of pension insurance and social guarantees for workers in the private sector, stating the importance of these guarantees in attracting manpower to work in this sector. The meeting emphasized the study of the laws on the conversion of government contract employees to permanent owners, as well as the discussion of administrative and financial matters relating to the settlement of this file, as well as the revision of the draft Social Security and Social Insurance laws, which are important for employees in the private sector. The committee, whose members include representatives of the General Secretariat of the Council of Ministers and the Board of Advisors, as well as representatives of the Ministries, Finance, Planning, Labor and Social Affairs, recommended that an expanded meeting of the committee be convened to host a number of experts and specialists, as well as representatives of the private sector and civil society organizations to resolve matters, and to provide and develop guarantees for workers in the public and private. Iraq's population census 2020 enters into force. Tariq Terror. 2019-5-14-14-15, 89 times read. Baghdad, Euphrates News. The head of the Central Bureau of Statistics, Zia Awad Kazim, revealed that the actual work of the general population census began with preparation and preparations for its implementation. The cadres of the Central Bureau of Statistics have begun work on the demarcation of the administrative boundaries of each province, said a statement to the ministry's information department, which received a copy from Kazim, saying that the staff of the Geographic Information Systems has been operating since last Tuesday in Baghdad. He added, the continuous meetings with international organizations, regional countries, and friends have shown their willingness and welcome to support them in the implementation of the census, as they will have to combine the actual and national indicators that serve the planners and researchers, as well as the formation of the Supreme Leader headed by the Minister of Planning. The head of the Central Bureau of Statistics stressed the distribution of powers to the people's leaders, while the managers will be tasked with the implementation of the census, pointing to the remarkable development on the website of the device, which reflects the beautiful image of the central statistical system, which is the window through which it overlooks. Qusay Abdul Fattah Rayouf, Director General of Technical Affairs, reviewed the achievements of the technical directorates, stressing that the Central Statistical Authority's action plan for 2019 is an ambitious and saturated plan for the various national indicators achieved through the implementation of numerous statistical surveys that meet the needs of data users, the needs of the National Development Plan and the Sustainable Development Goals. Quotation mark. The directors of the technical directorates reviewed the main achievements and constraints accompanying the work on the ground to develop solutions and guidance. At the end of the meeting, the chairman of the Central Bureau of Statistics followed up on the statistical figures issued by international organizations, the United Nations and the Arab states to keep abreast of developments in the technical fields and stressed the need to focus on training and statistical capacity building in the ASIS programs, Stata, Statistica, and the importance of humane, civilized and fair dealing in the distribution of tasks and missions to ensure the motivation of creative work and the promotion of the spirit of justice and the establishment of rules of excellence while avoiding the waste of time and use of official working hours while trying to reduce vacations and time permits for what he does. The machine is of many great tasks. It is estimated that the current population of Iraq is over 38 million, with an estimated growth of 800,000 to a million people annually. Article IV Consultations on Iraq 2019. A team from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, headed by G.
No.
Gavin Gray, visited Amman, Jordan, from April 25 until May 2, with the aim of holding discussions with the Iraqi authorities in the context of Article IV Consultations, 2019. At the end of the visit, Mr. Gray made the following statement: the end of the war on ISIS and the rebound in oil prices provide an opportunity to rebuild Iraq and overcome long-standing socio-economic problems. However, the challenges to achieving these goals are enormous. The pace of economic recovery has been slow, and reconstruction is very limited after the war has ended, and large-scale ongoing spending increases risks, putting public funds and central bank reserves on a path that cannot be sustained. Furthermore, the fight against corruption is crucial for enhancing the effectiveness of public institutions, for supporting investment efforts, and for creating employment opportunities on the part of the private sector. The near-term vulnerabilities receded in 2018, with a surplus in the budget and a build-up in central bank reserves. Non-oil growth is expected to rise to 5.4% in 2019 against the backdrop of increased investment spending. However, public finance deficits are expected to rise over the medium term, requiring funding that may be crowding out the private sector or eroding the reserves of the central bank. Under these circumstances, it may be difficult to sustain capital expenditure, and growth would be remarkably slow. Therefore, policy changes and structural reforms, including improved governance, are necessary to sustain the medium-term viability of the economy and to lay the foundations for inclusive growth. Public finance policy must be based on a gradual expansion of public investment, while at the same time building preventive safety margins. In order to find the required space, UNFPA staff recommend a budget savings of about 9% of GDP over the medium term, through tighter control over current spending, particularly on public sector wages, and interim measures to enhance income oil. The setting of current budget spending ceilings, from the budget for 2020 onwards, would enhance the capacity of the public finance framework to support a higher volume of investment and adjust to the shocks of oil prices. Major reforms should include containment of public sector wages. Short-term expenditure pressures can be suppressed through compensatory measures, such as a cap on bonuses, non-wage equivalents and other payments. Coupled with the enforcement of natural attrition in public sector owners, structural measures will need to be taken in the medium term, based on a functional workforce review, and the implementation of deeper reforms in the civil service system. Once new human resources and information management systems are put into place, reforms in the electricity sector are key to tackling poor quality of services and reducing the high cost of electricity in the budget, due to the low prices of electricity tariffs, chronic non-payment of electricity bills, poor maintenance, and over-reliance on exorbitant sources of electricity generation. The price, coupled with the lost electrical power throughout the generation, transmission and distribution of electricity. It is important to ensure the protection of the poor and the most vulnerable groups throughout the period of these reforms. Support for public money management. Strengthening the legal framework, improving commitment and other control systems are key factors aimed at minimizing the misuse of public resources and restoring budgetary discipline. In the financial sector, a robust restructuring plan for large-scale public sector banks, coupled with enhanced bank control, is essential to secure financial stability and will help to enhance financial development and inclusiveness. The strengthening of controls against money laundering and the financing of terrorism, as well as the strengthening of supervision operations, will help Iraq prevent the misuse of the Iraqi financial sector for the purposes of reaping the proceeds of crime derived from money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Addressing the weak governance and vulnerabilities through which corruption spreads is a very important factor in achieving the previously described policy objectives. As a first step, the Iraqi authorities need to develop a holistic understanding of the risks of corruption in Iraq, thus working to implement policies to eliminate these risks in a coherent and coordinated manner. The legislative framework must also be strengthened in order to effectively prevent officials from abusing their office or abusing state resources. To this end, the adoption of laws that strengthen the enforcement of the financial disclosure system and the criminalization of illicit gain must be expedited. Furthermore, the independence and impartiality of the anti-corruption bodies must be ensured, and the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing system must be operationalized to support anti-corruption efforts. The IMF team will prepare a report, subject to management approval, which is tentatively scheduled for consideration by the UNFPA Executive Board in July 2019. The fund's mission team would like to thank the Iraqi authorities for their frankness in conducting constructive discussions during this visit. https://www.imf.org. The fund exercises its supervisory role in 3 ways. Country oversight, in the form of regular comprehensive consultations, usually held on a level basis, with individual member countries on their economic policies, with the possibility of further progress discussions when needed. These consultations are called Article IV consultations, as they are based on the mandate contained in Article IV of the Charter of the Fund. But how are Article IV consultations conducted? First, a team of IMF experts visits the country concerned to collect economic and financial data and hold discussions with government officials and the central bank on the economic policies of the country concerned in the context of the latest developments. The group reviews the country's macroeconomic policies, public finance, monetary and exchange rates, assesses the soundness of the financial system, examines industrial and social policy issues, employment, good governance, the environment and others that can affect macroeconomic policies and performance. The panel then reports to the Executive Board on its findings, with the approval of the administration, and the board discusses the analysis contained in the report and its views are forwarded to the government of the country concerned in the form of a summary by the president of the board. In this way, the views of the international community and the lessons learned from international experience are gaining weight in the policies of the country concerned. Financial Inclusion and Sustainable Development. Monday, May 13, 2019.
Abdul Zahra Mohammed Al-Hindawi.
A year ago, the Central Bank of Iraq launched its national strategy for financial inclusion in Iraq, and witnessed the debate of the financial and business community at the time of a wide debate and various speculation, perhaps most of which was blasphemy towards the achievement of the objectives of this strategy, to the extent that some count it as bird dreams, in the context of the facts of the Iraqi reality, which is experiencing a lot of problems and contradictions. One of the most prominent of these challenges is the absence or lack of trust between the citizen and the bank, as a result of certain circumstances and policies, which caused the existence of a general state of financial decline. Represented by the reluctance of citizens to deal with banks, to the extent that the phenomenon of home compactness has become prevalent, which led to the suspension of the financial and economic cycle of a huge mass of cash. Estimated at 77% of the volume of currency traded was outside the walls of the banking system, chunky at home, with the risk of loss of these funds and development. It is natural that such indicators would paint a pessimistic view of the financial sector in Iraq, and thus represents an opportunity for pessimists to launch their predictions impossibly or at least difficult to pursue the objectives of the strategy of financial inclusion, which aims to provide banking and financial services to different segments of society to achieve one of the objectives of sustainable development, United Nations. Iraq went on the knees of the international community to achieve those goals, and in return the optimists were unleashing their dreams unleashed, stressing that the scene will change, and that confidence will return. And we will get rid of the phenomenon of hoarding money home, to come to the owners to deposit in banks. Between the teams of pessimism and optimism, the central bank has been working on the implementation of this strategy, in cooperation with government banks and private banks, and the latter may enter the first time in the arena of competition with government banks, and was the result of this competition in the implementation of the strategy of financial inclusion. The project to settle the salaries of state employees and private banks have a good area in this resettlement project, to the extent that some of them outnumber citizens, the government. The result of privileges and ease of procedures provided to customers, it is very clear that there has been a positive change in the scene financial and monetary for the Iraqis after the launch of the strategy of the central bank. And indicators of this positive change is the rise of the proportion of banking industry to 23% at the end of 2018 after the ratio of 11% in 2014, as announced by the Association of Iraqi Private Banks in a report issued recently. When we talk about an increase of more than 50% in the number of customers with banks, this is an important indicator, confirming that the signs of improvement continue to emerge, and the extent of financial coverage in a constant expansion. Without forgetting to say, the proportion of 23 is not large at a time when the percentage of those who have bank accounts around the world to more than 70% of the adult population, but cannot in any way compare our situation. As other countries preceded us in this regard, while Iraq faced conditions that were not easy has caused a decline in many development sectors, including the sector banks. In summary, what we can now diagnose is that there is an improvement in the type of relationship between the citizen and the banking sector, which would enhance the policy of opening up the trade by investing the monetary mass, which was absent due to lack of confidence. There is no doubt that the return of this confidence and steps may seem slow, but it will be established to open the horizons and bridges important to expand the scope of financial coverage, and I think we are close to watching small ATMs and spread everywhere, in the vendor of greenery, and in the oven and the barber at the barber, and certainly that the prevalence and spread of the scene requires great efforts by all concerned to achieve comprehensive financial coverage. In the pursuit of the goals of sustainable development, as the banking sector one of their most important paths, the parliamentary economy warns of the doubling of external debt because of the benefits. Finance Committee reveals the ZOR details of the financial management law and announce a mechanism for debt repayment. May 11, 2019, 6:39 p.m. Author, Al-Zahar Paper. Al-Zahar Hossein Fallah. The Finance Committee revealed the details of the draft financial management bill and announced the establishment of a mechanism to pay off foreign debts. Warned the Committee on Economy and Investment to double the value of external debt because of the benefits of them. A member of the Finance Committee, MP Hanin Al-Qaddo, said in an interview for Zora, the financial management law, which the House intends to enact, it is a financial constitution of the state because it is interested in all financial issues. In addition to the organization of financial relationship between the region and the center, foreign debts and the organization of investment work and the management of the treasury and relations with the state bank, as well as he is interested in financial aspects related to the private sector, pointing out that this law was read and discussed in Parliament and was supposed to legislate in early May, but there are claims by some political blocs to hold some of the amendments to the law. He pointed out that the law was ready since the previous parliamentary session, but the result of social and financial development and administrative problems, which necessitated amendments to the law in line with the current Iraqi reality, indicating that the parliament, if he could make this law, is consistent with the directions of the financial policy of the Iraqi government, it will serve the Iraqi economy. He pointed out that the Finance Committee held several workshops and discussions of the law in the presence of financial experts and economists, as well as university professors, for the purpose of studying the law extensively and the status of infringement as appropriate to him, pointing out that his committee awaiting the report of the economic advisor to the Minister of Finance Kamal al-Basri to put the finishing touches on the law to be ready for legislation. The Iraqi government should develop a plan to revitalize the Iraqi economy by activating industries, agriculture, trade, investment and non-dependence on oil, because oil revenues are affected by external changes, especially as the region is currently experiencing a state of tension, America and its allies on the one hand and Iran and its allies on the other. Economically, it is necessary to find alternatives to oil and not rely on external debt. The Cold War between America and China threatens the global economy. 14 hours ago. Researcher Shatha Khalil. The trade war between the United States and China has overshadowed the global economy over the past year, created uncertainty in the business world and even among consumers, and illustrated the Chinese-American rivalry with each other during the mid-20th century, with the purpose of global trade expansion extending from Asia to Africa to Europe, after World War II. Where China has resolved to introduce itself as the first among many counterparts in an independent, Asio-African bloc of nations, but this does not appeal to the United States of America. As US President Donald Trump is accustomed to attacking China, criticized the trade imbalance between the two countries and the Chinese intellectual property rules, which Trump to be handicapped by the progress of American companies. According to observers, the trade war is part of an American attempt to rein in the Chinese ascent, amid fears by Western governments of China's growing influence worldwide. The imposition of American tariffs on Chinese goods as well as China took the same step, imposing tariffs on billions of dollars, and possibly increasing, and Trump hinted at a 25% levy on Chinese merchandise worth $325 billion. The International Monetary Fund warned that the escalation threatens the global economy and secured global financial stability. Although Trump underestimated the impact of tariffs on the U.S. economy, their increase may affect some U.S. companies as well as consumers who may be charged by companies as part of the cost, analysts say. Permanent disagreement between China and America. The U.S.-China dilemma lies in Washington's refusal to give the right of navigation and control over the South China Sea, which is widely supported within the United States, explaining that since President Richard Nixon went to China in 1972, his country's policy towards the Pacific has been constant regardless partisan differences within the management of any president. China is applying to the United States in its GDP, trade, or advances in technology, such as the fifth-generation mobile phone, and the writer believes that, beginning in 2020, China will compete with the Boeing and Airbus civil aviation companies. Economic analyst Jeffrey Sachs predicts that the Cold War tactics used by US President Donald Trump will not work with China and China's economy will become bigger than the American economy, thanks to the population. What the United States is doing toward China is a Cold War, pushing its security allies in NATO, Japan, Australia and others to stop buying advanced Chinese technology, he said. In the same vein, Foreign Policy reported that the United States and China have become one of the strongest Cold Wars in history, especially after Beijing deliberately penetrated scores of high-ranking figures at the Pentagon. Washington's insistence on not abandoning the South China Sea, as well as commercial battles that will not subside. The U.S. magazine confirmed that the arms race and U.S. military rivalry with China will set the profile for the 21st century, pointing out that cyber penetrations peaked after Chinese computers hacked the maintenance records of US warships. The differences between the United States and China are stark and fundamental, and their solution can hardly be negotiated, but they can never be comfort. The magazine said the Chinese should be committed to pushing the U.S. Navy and Air Force away from the western Pacific Ocean south and east of China, while the U.S. Army is determined to stay in that area. China sees the South China Sea in the manner in which U.S. strategists saw the Caribbean in the 19th and early 20th centuries, as the main extension of the blue water from the block of their continental lands, which enables them to control the ocean. The Pacific is no longer the only barrier in relations between China and the United States, explaining that the new era of war will be impossible without the economic and technological race. Fears of the new Silk Road. The Silk Road is one of the most important trade routes connecting the Far East Asia to Africa and Northern Europe, through Central Asia, Eastern Europe and the Middle East, moving through these lines of goods a range of roads, railways and interconnected sea lines. This major initiative aims to revive My Path the Silk Belt, the Wild Road, which connected China to the world, through which China aspires to raise the volume of exchanges through the Silk Road for about $2.5 trillion in 10 years. The number of participating countries so far has reached 65, representing 60% of the world's population. China asserts that its project cannot be regarded as a hegemony as promoted by a number of Western countries, but rather offers of partnership and cooperation among nations, where China adopts the world's approach to the logic of mutual profit, or the so-called win-win principle. But this project certainly helps to redraw the map of power. International balances are significant, posing a threat to Western industrialized countries, competing for their markets and moving them out of their spheres of influence. The U.S. reports to the Pentagon show that it is facing the Chinese threat with much more vigor than its Russian counterpart, as Beijing, with its high potential as an emerging technological power, is perhaps outpacing and bypassing Washington in digital battle systems. China's ideological development has greatly influenced relations between China and the United States. After Beijing's tough development from the reign of Deng Xiaoping and his successors was seen to have reached the reign of Xi Jinping to become a solid authoritarian state, confirming China's technological development, which strengthens the conflict between the two countries, instead of easing it, after the war turned into just one click on the computer. New fees. The new charges imposed by Trump are counted on the American importers of Chinese merchandise, not the Chinese exporter, and their value is included in their selling prices, which means that the American middle class finds itself at risk of paying higher prices for current consumption goods. As for China, The levy imposed on more than $250 billion in Chinese imports of punitive customs duties, raised Friday from 10 to 25% to $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. He added Trump by launching procedures that would allow tariffs on the remaining $300 billion in Chinese imports, and that the new lifting of customs duties would probably not be effective until a few months later. But the wave of it allowed China to tighten its grip on tough trade negotiations. The lifting of customs duties, which came into effect on October 5, 2019, will raise the annual expenses of a four-member American family for a total of $767, said the Agence France-Presse partnership. For its part, Beijing asserts that it will not be subject to threats. And Liu said that the chief negotiator stressed that China strongly opposes the recent increase in tariffs but believes that the occurrence of small setbacks is normal and inevitable during the negotiations between the two countries. When we look forward, we continue to feel cautious optimism. In conclusion, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in China, in a statement, announced its commitment to help the two sides reach a sustainable solution, saying, "While we are frustrated with the increase in tariffs, we support the existing efforts of both sides to reach a strong and effective agreement that solves the fundamental and structural issues that have long our members faced it in China. And we are waiting for will the negotiations succeed or the next setbacks be greater." Economic Studies Unit. Link Center for Research and Strategic Studies.